Speaker, I ask unanimous consent for all members to have 5 legislative days, revise and extend their remarks, and include extraneous material on the subject of my special order.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am honored and proud to represent the people of Western Pennsylvania, good, hardworking, patriotic people who are pretty frustrated. We are not living in normal times. This should not be a normal run-of-the-mill special order hour. What I will convene today, my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle, who you'll hear from, these are people who know how to fight for their people. They know how to win. They're not shy or afraid about a righteous fight. They are members of Congress in this chamber from across the country, across the ideological spectrum, and may not agree on everything. Certainly we don't. But we agree that too many in our party have lost their way, and it's time to wake the heck up. Now, don't misunderstand me. This administration and those helping them are wreaking havoc on so much of our country. We see Social Security under attack. Social Security Administration workers, their ability to deliver the hard-earned benefits that seniors have worked their whole lives for. We see VA employees on the chopping block, fired, contracts scrutinized and then cut. The promise of this country to care for veterans betrayed. We see cancer research, life-saving medicine trials, clinical trials interfered with, threatened, funding on the chopping block. The American people are mad. They should be mad. And look, this administration's approval ratings, they're in free fall. American people are rejecting so much of what we see. But too many on my side of the aisle aren't giving a strong enough alternative, a bold enough alternative. And while the president's numbers may be in free fall, we also see favorability of the Democratic Party at record lows, the lowest CNN has seen since 1992. There has not been a strong enough vision from Democrats on this side of the aisle. We have something to say. Our party needs to change, and economic populism and patriotism should be where we go, standing up for people to revive the American dream. Democrats should be fighting hard against corruption, and the giant corporations who fund so much of that. We should be fighting against anyone else, any force, any company, you name it, that has made life a ripoff for our people. Folks are mad, and they should be. It's justifiable anger. The American dream is gone for too many people. People who work hard, who play by the rules and yet can't catch a break, who see life as too expensive. People are right. The American people understand that our economy has been rigged against so many. And I say the American dream hasn't slipped away, it has been ripped away. I'm 40 years old. My generation, and those younger than me, the first generation in a long time since the Second World War, who now grows up and don't expect to be better off than their parents. That's what the American dream is all about. It didn't just happen on accident. There are villains here. Corporate power and corruption have been eating away at the American dream. Hedge funds, speculators buying up houses, jacking up the cost of that housing, becoming lousy landlords, pricing people out of what could be a nest egg for their retirement, their home. Monopolies jacking up prices and killing small businesses every chance they can get. Pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs, raising the cost of medicine, killing local pharmacies. The list goes on and on. Now, this president and others on the other side have capitalized on this anger, used it to get power, lift up their efforts now to let robber barons plunder this government, to attack the fundamental bargain with our seniors and veterans and so many others. Democrats need to wake up and stop defending elites and the establishment. They have failed the American people. Across both parties, those who have been in power have failed at the fundamental task of protecting and strengthening the American dream. So today, a group of us are coming forward, coming to the floor, proposing a new way ahead for Democrats, a new way ahead for this country. We need a fighting spirit of economic populism. It is patriotic. We need this patriotism to be at the heart of this fight and our fight against corruption and anyone else who's in the way of our people and who has wrecked the American dream. So what does this mean, this economic populism? In a sentence, it is fighting for a life that people can afford. It's bringing corporate power to heel. It is taking on the corruption that pervades this town, Washington. And the economy and what life costs people should never be an afterthought for anyone who serves in a chamber like this. And it ought to put the people who work their butts off front and center of what our government does and who we think about every day in every action. It is fighting for a life that people can afford, and it is bringing corporate power to heel. Because we know that out-of-control corporate power leads to higher cost. It leads to worse safety. It leads to lower quality, and we see it play out across so much of our economy. It's weakened our defense industrial base, and thus it's weakened our military. It's hurt small businesses across main streets all over our districts. It has crushed workers. It has led to rising costs that we all live with. And we should take on corruption no matter where we see it, no matter the party. The last thing that we need is a bunch of wimps looking for a win-win every time. Not every fight is going to have a win-win. There are villains in this story, in this society of ours, who have made life miserable for so many. You call them robber barons, you call them oligarchs, whatever you want. But we got to be willing to take them on. And this embrace of economic populism, it might sound and look different depending on where in the country or who the messenger is. For me, I'm a Navy guy. I served at sea. I served in Iraq. To me, this is a patriotic and righteous fight. And I'm from Western Pennsylvania, the Rust Belt, a place where we saw the rich and powerful plot to strip us for parts. We're the people who made the steel that built America. We've always answered this country's call. Those efforts to strip us, to wreck our way of life, no more. You'll hear from members, again, across the ideological spectrum on the Democratic side today, but we're united in this. The era of a spineless Democratic Party must end. Now is not the time for wimpy concessions and then call it a win-win. Not when the American dream has been killed for so many people in America. And now is not the time to shy from a fight against corruption. Our people see it and they know that our government has allowed the economy to be rigged against people. Those villains, that corruption, they want you to think the problem is some woke college kid or some trans kid who wants their liberty, wants their freedom. That's not why your prescription drugs are expensive. It's not why housing is expensive. It's that corruption and those villains who want you thinking that when they're the ones who've made life terrible for people. We know the real root of the problem is corruption and corporate power run amok. And too many have been pathetic at talking about corruption and showing that they're up for this fight. And some on this side of the aisle have been complicit, helping corporations plunder this country. That should end. And we have to be willing to go to the mat for an economy that works for people who work hard, who play by the rules and want the American dream back. The roots of this party that I'm proud to be a part of go back to the New Deal. It is a working class party at its core. Allowing somebody else to fake economic populism and win power is real and dangerous, and we are living through the cost of it right now. But again, the people you'll hear from today, they work hard and fight hard for their districts. They get this. They're not faking populism, and they know how to win in places where you got to win. So I'm proud to start to introduce my colleague from the great state of Connecticut, the gentle lady from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro, and yield 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker.
Let me just say thank you to my colleague from Pennsylvania, who at his roots understands the plight of working Americans, middle-class families, working families, and the vulnerable, and stands tall on their behalf and wants to utilize the good offices of this institution to make sure that it does what the Founding Fathers intended it to do, and that is to provide opportunity for people in this nation. That's what my friend Congressman Deluzio is all about. And one thing about this current administration is clear. They are doing nothing about the cost of living crisis in this nation, which is getting worse. President Trump said he will fight for the working class, but instead put Elon Musk and billionaires in charge of our government. I applaud again Representative Deluzio for hosting this special order, economic patriotism, taking on corporate power, as well as for all his work supporting the right to organize, creating well-paying union jobs here in America. High prices are devastating the middle class, working class, and the vulnerable. Since my very first day in the Congress, I have been focused on lowering the cost of living for Americans who struggle to get by. And I am appalled by how many families who are struggling to afford basics while corporations get bigger, richer, and more influential over our lives than ever. President Trump, as I said, campaigned on lowering prices. He pledged to, quote, bring food costs down on day one. Instead, the opposite has happened. Food costs are rising. His own USDA, Department of Agriculture, recently reported egg prices could rise 41% over the next year. Since taking office, he has done nothing to help families struggling at the grocery checkout. As a result, big corporations are consolidating, creating monopolies, and making unbelievable profits. Cal-Maine, which controls about a fifth of the domestic egg market and is the largest producer and distributor of shell eggs in the United States, has reported that its profits through the second quarter of 2025 fiscal year are 342% higher than the same period last year. Instead of doing anything to address this cost of living crisis, the president has stacked his cabinet with billionaire after billionaire, empowering them to slash the programs American families rely on, with no oversight, no disclosures about their conflicts of interest. Elon Musk, the unchecked billionaire leading the efforts to end Social Security as we know it, owes the success of his companies to billions in federal contracts and huge factories in China. Yet he refuses to answer any questions from the Congress about his investments. These issues concern every American. Democrats are standing up for them, standing up against the blatant corporation of this administration, the giant corporations padding their profits at the expense of the middle class and the working class. And the Republican focus is to rip away programs like Social Security and Medicaid. The fact is that American families today are living paycheck to paycheck. And some of the biggest corporations in the country are taking advantage of it, all while Americans are paying more for less due to corporate price gouging, shrinkflation, and while the CEOs of the nation's largest grocery stores and supermarkets rake in record salaries. I just came from a congressional hearing, our Steering and Policy Committee, Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, on food prices and food stamps, and listening to the stories of working Americans with families who are hard-pressed and who are frightened to death of a $230 billion cut to the food stamp program, which would end that lifeline for themselves and for their families. And last year, the FTC identified the large grocery store chains exploited product shortages due to the pandemic by raising prices significantly, more than needed to cover their added costs, and they have continued to increase their profits. What is the Republicans' response to this cost of living crisis, driven by corporate consolidation and power? Why? To give out even more corporate tax cuts, of course. $4.5 trillion worth of them, to be precise, paid for by slashing Medicaid, which serves nearly a third of all Americans. Enough is enough, and it is time for this Congress, and it is time for Democrats to act to rein in this habitual price gouging from massive corporations, rein in the unchecked billionaires enriching themselves while Americans suffer, and rein in the Republican spending cuts targeting Social Security and Medicaid. If the Trump administration continues to prioritize tax cuts for the rich over price cuts for the middle class, then I will continue to stand with my colleagues as we call out their broken promises and fight back against their disastrous policies. There is another path forward, one which Democrats and Republicans could take together, a path of economic patriotism, where we take on corporate monopolies and the self-serving billionaires who are squeezing the middle class, the working class, and the vulnerable. A path that listens to the American people, protects programs like Medicaid and Social Security, while lowering the cost of living through proven policies like the expanded child tax credit, which lifted half of our children in this nation out of poverty, lowered the hunger rate, and provided a path forward in economic security for millions of families in the United States. That's the path that I am taking. It's the path that I know my colleague, Congressman Deluzio, is taking, and I hope that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will join us in this effort. and I thank you for organizing this effort.
Thank you, gentlemen, not just for joining us today, but for your long commitment to the dignity of work, for fighting for people, for better trade policy, and so much else. I'm honored now to welcome in a colleague from California, but who has strong Pennsylvania roots, which lends great credit to him. The gentleman from California, Mr. Khanna.
Well, thank you, Representative Deluzio, for your leadership, for convening this group and focusing us on an agenda of economic patriotism. The reality is in this country, and as you know from in Western Pennsylvania, we have watched industry after industry leave the country for China and Mexico. Western Pennsylvania won us our freedom. They produced more steel than Japan and Germany combined in World War II. And yet today we've got 4% steel. China, 50% of the world's steel. Aluminum left, paper left, textiles left. Town after town in this country was hollowed out. Since 2000, 90,000 factories have closed. And that doesn't just mean jobs leaving. We've all heard the stories. People whose families were destroyed.
The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, message from the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Secretary.
I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
I thought the President was going to endorse our plan here on economic patriotism. The reality is these factories left, and you've had people who faced suicide. They had, one of the folks in Warren, Ohio, told me about 13 people because of these plant closures took their lives or faced severe depression. And our country for 50 years watched. Rosa DeLauro didn't watch. I mean, she was speaking out against these bad trade deals. But for most part of American history in the last 50 years, we watched the hollowing out of these communities. And we watched wealth pile up in districts like mine in Silicon Valley and New York. I mean, my district has $14 trillion of wealth. But the income inequality in this country soared. And so what this group wants to do, one of the things we want to do is to renew economic revitalization and manufacturing, advanced manufacturing in these communities, to have a real plan for new semiconductors, new robotics, advanced steel, advanced automobiles, and have new factories, new industry come up. Now, the President and J.D. Vance understood that the country was hollowed out, and they understood that people were angry, legitimately angry, and they understood that the ship of America had a huge hole in it. The problem is they get there, and their plan to solve this is to hand the reins to a number of headstrong billionaires who are libertarians. I've known these folks. I've known Elon for 15 years. I don't know what Elon knows about Johnstown, Pennsylvania, or Farrell, Pennsylvania, or Youngstown. I mean, he's going to go out and they're making deals with UAE and they're supercharging the private sector deals. The problem is that's not going to build the communities that have been hollowed out. We know what builds communities from Hamilton to Lincoln to FDR. We need a government that says if you make it in America, we will buy it. That's what we did, by the way, for SpaceX. That's what we did for Intel. That's what we did in World War II. We need a government that says if you skill the factories here, we'll help finance it. We need a government that says we're going to work to invest in the plumbers and electricians and machinists so that we can actually have a workforce that builds these the new factories we need. We need to say that we're going to have housing in this area to have economic revitalization. We need a national economic development strategy. And Senator Rubio and I actually co-authored a bill on that. But that's not what the White House is doing. Instead, they think that just having these billionaires cut deals with the private sector is going to help the working or middle class. It'll help my district. We'll make more money with AI. It'll help more of the financial and technology elites. I'll tell you what it's not going to do. It's not going to rebuild the communities that have had a raw deal in America. And what economic patriots believe, even though we have different ideologies, is that it is ordinary Americans who built this country. It's working class Americans and middle class Americans who built the country. The genius lies not with the billionaires and the technologists. It lies with hardworking Americans, and we're going to build this country back from the bottom up. That's our belief. And I appreciate Representative Deluzio's leadership on this. If you give me, am I out of time, Representatives? Give me one more minute, because my friend Fareed Zakaria had this whole spiel on how manufacturing doesn't matter. I like Fareed usually, but on this, he's dead wrong. He cited Japan and Germany as countries that did manufacturing and missed the tech boom. And so he said, well, we should do the tech boom and the finance boom, and we don't need to do manufacturing. Well, he didn't cite one country that did a bit of both. China. China did a lot of manufacturing. They took all of our manufacturing. And America needs to understand, if we're going to innovate, yes, we should innovate on technology. Yes, we should innovate on finance. But we also have to have advanced manufacturing in this country to remain the world superpower. People say comparative advantage, but comparative advantage, you get to choose what your comparative advantage is in. If China had just done comparative advantage, they would have been growing rice for 30 years. That was their comparative advantage. They said, no, we want to build things. Well, it's time America realizes we want to be building things and realizes the value of advanced manufacturing. And Representative Deluzio certainly gets it. He's one of the brightest voices in Congress. I also want to recommend his op-ed that I thought was the best piece written on trade policy, fair peace, in the last 30 years, if anyone that I've read. So I appreciate your leadership and appreciate your convening us.
Sir, I thank the gentleman from California who understands this deeply, of what we need to do, this economic patriotism, what it means for manufacturing, what it means for communities who saw these jobs not leave, but taken away by this ideology in Wall Street and the politicians around here who helped them, which said that all that mattered was chasing the cheapest labor, the weakest labor rules, non-existent environmental rules. It made them citizens of nowhere. They didn't care about this country or the communities and the people who worked hard to make them rich, whether they made the steel or anything else, as we did in America. And it's a stain on our story in this country, and frankly, it's not too patriotic. We think our side of the aisle, our party, ought to be dominating the fight to supercharge American manufacturing and jobs, not peddling this crap of telling industrial workers, go learn to code or something. That's nonsense. Let's invest in the jobs here to make stuff. Let's have a more muscular trade industrial policy. That's how we get back on the road to economic freedom for people. And members on both sides of the aisle here, both parties, have long embraced this wrong for decades neoliberal disaster of unlimited and free trade. I think it's been a failure of government across the board. We should push back on these lousy trade deals. We trade with our friends, we trade with others, but we do it on fair terms. What's not fair is seeing American workers undercut by governments like Communist China that use the power of the state to dump artificially cheap products in our markets, that circumvent our trade rules, that let their workers be exploited. We've got to beef up trade enforcement on Communist China and others like them. There have to be meaningful consequences. Let's have tariffs be part of that, but be smart and strategic. What we've seen this administration do has been chaotic. It's been reckless. Businesses cannot plan. There is no certainty day to day of what the trade environment will be. And it is absent from any full strategic industrial policy that is the heart of economic patriotism. To make more stuff in America, you got to have a full policy that is centered by workers and industrial policy. One of my colleagues who gets this deeply, this idea of economic patriotism, I'm proud to yield to Mr. Ryan of New York, a West Point grad, who I won't hold that against you too much, but deeply understands this, understands the fight that we need, and understands that our core economic patriotism ought to be what we're all about. I yield to the gentleman from New York.
I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Deluzio, for your leadership on this, for bringing this group together, for reminding us that as Americans who love this country, we need that strong, muscular economic patriotism to serve my constituents in my district, which is the Hudson Valley of New York State, and across this country. And Mr. Speaker, I rise today because I love this country. I believe it is the greatest country in the history of the world, and I believe it is worth fighting for, and we must fight for it now. I also believe when you see something that isn't working, you stand up and you do everything in your power to fix it. Our country and our party are at a crossroads, and it's up to us, the people with the incredible honor to stand on the floor of the United States House of Representatives in this chamber to forge the path forward. Unlike some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I won't try to deny the outcome of the election in November 2024. Too many Americans felt Democrats had become the party of the elites and had stopped meeting people where they are, the pain that they're feeling in their lives and their families at their kitchen table when they get up in the morning and go to work and come home exhausted at night. Democrats need to learn from our mistakes. This moment is not ideological. It's about who fights for the people and who fights for the elites. I believe, first and foremost, if you're using labels like moderate or progressive, you're missing the entire point. I gave former President Biden hell for failing to secure our border. I think that's a nonpartisan issue. That doesn't make me a, quote, moderate. I campaigned with my colleague AOC against big corporations screwing over my constituents and polluting the Hudson River in my district. That doesn't make me a progressive. If the last election made anything clear, its high costs and economic pain are first and foremost on our constituents' minds. Donald Trump promised to help with that. He has not, unequivocally. In fact, everything he's done in office has helped his billionaire cronies, who, by the way, gave hundreds of millions of dollars to his campaign at the expense of families like the ones that I represent in my district across the Hudson Valley. Trump's failure to bring down costs is handing Democrats the answer on a silver platter. Our response cannot stop at Donald Trump works for the wealthy, though, which is true. It must go further. Donald Trump works for the wealthy, and Democrats work and fight for you, the working class and middle class of this country, the economic patriots of the United States of America. Just over a year ago, I stood on this very floor and ultimately successfully called on the CEO of a local utility monopoly in my district, which had been screwing over my constituents, robbing them blind, literally emptying their savings accounts of their dwindling savings accounts due to a failure of their billing practices. I called on him to resign, and he was held accountable and did. That company ultimately paid $62 million back to my constituents in form of accountability. Now Optum, a healthcare company, which is a subsidiary of United Health Group, the single largest health insurer in our country, and really one of only 3 companies in the United States of America that controls the entire healthcare market, has been buying up medical practices across my district. So just a few weeks ago, I launched a community inquiry. Thousands of my constituents and my neighbors and friends who have been hurt by Optum have responded, detailing horrific stories of declining healthcare quality, erroneous billing, and we're continuing to gather this evidence, the voices of the people, the American people, and to ultimately hold this big corporation who's been making record-breaking profits quarter after quarter accountable. Another example, for months, broadcast companies, big telecoms in New York, were in a deadlock fight over streaming rights that left over 1 million New Yorkers, paying customers, staring at blank screens, trying to watch sports games to take their mind off of all the pressures in their lives. Knicks fans and Rangers fans who'd paid couldn't see. As one of those fans, I was mad as hell that I had paid and couldn't watch a game while a multi-billion-dollar corporation kept raking in more profits and didn't seem to care at all about their paying customers. Thankfully, under pressure, that blackout has ended, and we're now demanding Optimum, the telecom, the main perpetrator of this, pay back the customers who were harmed. I've also introduced something called the Stop Sports Blackout Act. So if this ever happens again, there won't be a question that a company has to pay and give customers to refunds for games they couldn't watch. whether in their utility bills, their health care bills, or just trying to watch a sports game. That's putting money back in people's pockets when pressure is so high, and that matters. In closing, before I yield the balance back to my colleague, there is so much power now in the voices of our communities, but only if we, their elected representatives, listen and act and elevate it. That's economic patriotism. I'm proud that as a Democrat, our party stands with law enforcement and police officers, stands with small businesses, stands with veterans, stands with hardworking families, with nurses, teachers, truck drivers. Democrats stand with our constituents, whether they voted for us or not. And yes, we stand against Donald Trump and his harmful policies, but we stand for so much more. A group of patriots, unyielding and unwavering in their dedication to fighting for the people and against anyone who would do them harm. That's the Democratic Party that I am proud to be a part of, and that is our path out of this moment. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time to Mr. Deluzio.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. I thank the gentleman from New York for his fight, his stiff spine in this. I now want to recognize a colleague from Rhode Island who knows how to take on a good fight and win one. Gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Magaziner.
Well, thank you to my friend, Mr. Deluzio, for bringing us together and helping us have an important conversation about how we restore the mantle of fighting for working people. I was born and raised in the most patriotic town in the country, Bristol, Rhode Island. We have the oldest and longest running 4th of July celebration in the country. So I learned from a young age to be patriotic. But I also learned that patriotism is not just about parades and parties and barbecues. It's about believing in a country where anything is possible for those who are willing to work hard. And I know that because it's my family's story. At the turn of the last century, my mother's family came to America from Ireland and Poland. My grandfather fought in the Pacific, then came home and worked in a factory that made airplane parts. His wife, my grandmother, worked in a department store. Their jobs weren't glamorous, they weren't anything special, but they earned enough to buy a house, to raise 4 kids, and to build a stable middle-class life. My father's side of the family had a similar story. They came from Eastern Europe and settled in New York City. My great-grandfather got involved in labor organizing, and my grandfather was a bookkeeper at a company that sold fruit. They all came of age during the New Deal era, and they voted Democrat because they knew that the Democratic Party had the backs of working people. And then my parents met, they started a small business together, they were successful, and now here I am in the United States Congress, thanks to the hard work of the generations that came before me. Today in Rhode Island, I meet working people every day who remind me of my grandparents. Factory workers, house cleaners, nurses, kitchen workers, grinding out a living, believing that if they work hard and do the right thing, that better days lie ahead. But the more I hear from the working people I represent, they are frustrated with politics. They don't think either party represents them. They're working harder than ever and are having a hard time paying their bills. They certainly can't afford to save money. They see billionaires on Wall Street and in Silicon Valley get richer while they can't afford everything on their grocery list. They see Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, gleefully cutting services for seniors and veterans, and Donald Trump pushing yet another tax cut for the very rich. They see a Republican Party hell-bent on taking away people's health care, and a Democratic Party that means well, but tries to be all things to all people and too often fails to deliver. Our grandparents knew a Democratic Party that not only had good intentions, but that knew how to get things done. The working people I represent don't want a handout, but they do expect a level playing field and a fair shot, and they want a Democratic Party with a real plan. So what does that look like? It looks like making billionaires like Elon Musk pay their fair share so that we can give tax relief to the middle class. It looks like passing the PRO Act so that workers in retail and fast food can join a union and earn a ticket to the middle class, just like my grandfather did in his factory. It looks like universal preschool and affordable childcare, not just because it's good for kids, but because it helps parents work and build their savings. And it means passing my bill to guarantee 10 days of paid vacation for all workers, because Americans work hard and they deserve to take some time off every once in a while and enjoy their lives without losing their jobs or their income. For too long, the system in this town has been rigged for the wealthy and well-connected, but that does not have to be our future. There is a new generation rising, people who are tired of being left behind and are ready for something better. We don't need the Democratic Party to be all things to all people. We just need to reclaim our position as the party for working people. That work begins now. And I want to thank my colleagues who are here tonight, who get it. I want to thank Representative Deluzio for bringing us together. I am ready to roll up my sleeves alongside all of you, and I yield back to Mr. Deluzio. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman for Rhode Island. He gets it, and this is not some hypothetical problem. We're living through the cost of losing and what it is to see the chaos and harm that comes from it. The Democratic Party has to do better. And so I'm very honored to introduce a colleague from the other side of the country who has been a bulldog in the fight against monopolies and so much else, a former chair of the Progressive Caucus, gentlelady from Washington, Ms. Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Congressman Deluzio, for leading this conversation about how we can stand up for our people and unrig the economy. That is economic patriotism. I want to be very clear. Our economy has been rigged by giant corporations and the wealthiest for way too long. And as these corporations consolidate more power, the rich get richer, and everyone else is just struggling to get by just on the basics. They need groceries, housing, healthcare, basic medications. Private insurance companies are now buying up your local healthcare clinics and doctors' offices. In my home state of Washington, a handful of healthcare systems control 90% of hospital beds. And what does that mean? It means that people are seeing their costs triple while the quality of care goes down, all so that big pharma and corporate CEOs can pad their already overflowing pockets. Mergers are pushing independent grocery stores out of business. Today, just a few supermarket chains control all of the grocery stores in the country. Albertsons and Kroger's, two of the big grocery chains, actually tried to merge, and I was so proud to lead the amicus brief with other members of Congress to actually oppose that merger. And thanks to Democrats and the FTC under Lena Khan, we were able to stop that merger. Because we know and we've seen that when these mergers happen, corporations shut down stores, they fire workers, and they raise prices. Look at the housing market. When rents are sky high, and there literally is not a single place in the country where someone can afford rent on the minimum wage, private equity is coming in to buy up the apartments and colluding to drive up the rents so it's even more unaffordable to keep a roof over your head. It wasn't always this way. From World War II to the late 1970s, we actually rigorously enforced our antitrust laws to ensure that mom and pop businesses had a chance to compete against these mega companies. Consumers had choices, and workers had good jobs. And you know what? Our economy actually grew. But starting with Republican President Ronald Reagan, that antitrust enforcement dwindled down and large corporations took over. And today, income and wealth inequality are higher than they have been in a century. And 2 months into the Trump administration, wages are still low and prices are still high. Does not need to be this way. We do not, in the richest country in the world, we do not suffer from scarcity, we suffer from greed. And we have to be willing to take that on. Take on corporate power and corruption and make a meaningful difference in the everyday lives of working people. We have to lower prices so that everyone can have a roof over their heads, put food on the table, send their kids for an education, and retire with dignity. We have to have living wages for every worker, and we have to tax the billionaires so that they just pay a little bit more of their fair share like everyone else is doing. We can and have to break up the largest corporations so they can't keep screwing regular people. We got to stand up and fight back against corruption, against greed, against consolidation, and for the American people to have that American dream. That is economic patriotism. That's what we're going to fight for, and I'm so grateful to my colleague from Pennsylvania for making sure we put that out there.
I thank the gentlelady from Washington, spot on, and I'm reminded of a quote from President Franklin Roosevelt, who faced the same kind of complaints from them who he called the economic royalists. We can call them robber barons, oligarchs, you name it. They complained that they said FDR was trying to overthrow the institutions of America. And I'll quote President Roosevelt. What they really complain of is that we seek to take away their power. Our allegiance to American institutions requires the overthrow of this kind of power. Here we are again. I think we can no longer allow anyone over here to play footsies with the corporate overlords and robber barons who have their heels on the necks of the American people. We need to restore competition and break the monopolies. And my colleague from the Granite State gets this, having worked in the Justice Department to take on monopolies, has been in the trenches in the fight against this kind of corporate power run amok. So I will yield, Mr. Speaker, to the gentlelady from New Hampshire, Ms. Goodlander.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And many thanks to my colleague from Pennsylvania for bringing us together this afternoon. Economic patriotism. We're coming from all across the country. We're coming from different backgrounds with different ideas, but we're united by things that are really powerful. We're united by a love of our country, by a belief in our country, by a belief fundamentally in the American people. You know, I was born and raised in the greatest state in the nation, the state of New Hampshire, the state that made the nation. We were the 9th to ratify the Constitution. And I was born and raised down the road from the family farm that my great-grandfather built when he came to this country. He was 16 years old. He didn't speak a word of English, but he believed in the American dream, and he raised my grandfather, Sam, on that farm. He was an economic patriot, my grandfather, Sam. He really believed your word is your bond. He believed that hustle was the name of the game. He milked cows, he baled hay, and he got his start as a businessman selling airplane rides at the Nashua airport. His slogan was $1 million thrill for a $1 bill. He went on to become a door-to-door salesman for Electrolux vacuum cleaners. He worked hard because he believed in the American dream. He was a lifelong Republican who loved with his whole heart one of our great presidents, I think maybe the greatest economic patriot we've seen in the White House, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And I was reminded today of a great speech that President Roosevelt gave 81 years ago, the Economic Bill of Rights, it's been called. He talked about economic rights that are self-evident, but as with all self-evident rights that we know in this great document, our Constitution, they aren't self-executing. I want to focus for a moment on one of the rights that President Roosevelt talked about. He said that there's a right of every businessman, businesswoman too, large and small, to trade in an atmosphere of freedom from unfair competition and domination by monopolies at home or abroad. Monopolies, it's been said on the floor of this House, on the floor of the United States Senate, that monopolies are inconsistent with our form of government. And it's true. The anti-monopoly spirit is as old as America. It's rooted in a simple idea that power has got to be checked. Just like political power, economic power has got to be checked too. But the fact is, big corporations, monopolies have too much power in America today. I see it everywhere I go. I come to Congress having worked in the Department of Justice in the Antitrust Division. And it's a division full of patriotic men and women, many of them nonpartisan, who come to this work with the basic belief in this country and in the power that must be checked by government. So what do we mean? What kind of power are we checking? Every day on this job, as I've traveled around the state of New Hampshire, I hear about big agricultural corporations that are screwing family farmers, like the family farm I grew up down the road from. Big health insurers who are charging you more for less. Big health insurers who are rolling up the entire industry, from providers to hospital beds to the prescription drugs that people rely on for their lives. Big tech companies that are using your data, your valuable data, for their own gain. The list goes on. As we look across our consolidated economy, we see that corporate power has reached its apex in industries big and small, from door locks to the defense industrial base. We've always found common ground in this country around the basic idea that just like political power's got to be checked, economic power's got to be checked too. And I'm so grateful to my colleague from Pennsylvania for bringing us together today. What I'd say is our antitrust laws are alive and well, but they could use an update. And I look forward to working with everyone here today and in the days ahead to make that dream a reality, because it's core to the American dream. So with that, I yield back to my friend from Pennsylvania.
Speaker, I thank the gentlelady from New Hampshire. And this corporate power, we feel it in so much of our economy. It's also what we feel that corrupts this place, our nation's capital. We see it with the unlimited money that runs through our elections, unlimited super PAC spending that corporations can dump in to buy the favors they get from politicians. People who we represent, Democrat, Republican, Independent, you name it, they hate this corruption. They see it, they smell it, they know it's crooked. It is why you have pharmacy benefit managers extracting profits on the backs of people's medicine, killing chain pharmacies. It's why you can't even fix your own stuff, that we even have to fight for the right to repair. I mean, what could be more American than the idea that you could fix your own stuff, whether it's a tractor, a car, an ice cream machine, you name it. This right to repair goes to the heart of this. It's why you see housing costs out of control, with Wall Street buying up housing and then buying influence down here. It's also why you see the obscene practice of people getting rich in Congress, trading stock on information they may learn in their job serving the people in Congress. It's corrupt. We ought to end it. I'm proud to yield now to a colleague of mine who gets this fight against corruption, who's organized workers, who leads the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Kassar.
Thank you, Mr. Deluzio. I'm Greg Kassar. I'm proud to represent the heart of Texas in the United States Congress, to chair the Congressional Progressive Caucus. But before all that, I started my career as a labor organizer. And I saw up close how corporate lobbyists and corrupt politicians would trade campaign contributions for corporate tax breaks, and how they would trade lower wages for workers for fatter paychecks for CEOs and their political friends. They thought that working people could do nothing about this. They thought their workers were too divided to push back. But on construction sites, guys who spoke different languages and who came from different places were pissed off, and they were willing to put their differences aside to come together and fight back, stop the corruption, and demand a fair paycheck. We didn't win by going on bended knee and begging big corporations for better treatment. We did it by unifying working people around some central ideas: that Americans deserve a good pay for a full day's work, and that taxpayer dollars are meant for the common good. They are not for corporate welfare. Those ideas brought workers together to win historic wage increases and better benefits in the heart of Texas. And this is what we need today in America. And this is what we need the Democratic Party to be all about. The central goal of the Democratic Party should be to break the unholy alliance between corporate greed and corrupt government. We can't just beg CEOs to please bring down prices. We have to break up the giant monopolies that are screwing over consumers and small businesses alike. We can't just beg big CEOs to say, please be nicer to us. No, we have to get big money out of politics so that the ultra-rich don't have a bigger say in this country than the everyday person. And we cannot just beg corporations to give people a raise. We have to unionize workplaces and pass laws that protect the American worker and the American worker's wages. And to get there, we have to transform the Democratic Party into a party that fights for working people first, no matter what, and into a party that is willing to stand up to the powerful special interests that are screwing over working people. Because if we love our country, we have to be willing to fight for the people who make it work. I yield back to my friend, Mr. Deluzio.
Thank the gentleman from Texas. You want to respect hard work, you got to respect the people who do that hard work. That's at the core of this, and respecting the labor movement is so central. I'm from Western Pennsylvania, which is sacred ground in that labor movement where people bled for the right to organize. That fight continues. I recognize now a colleague from Oregon who gets this, who understands about the dignity of work and fighting for our people. Gentlelady from Oregon, Ms. Hoyle.
Thank you. I'm Val Hoyle, and I represent the Central and South Coast of Oregon. I'm a proud third-generation union member with a background in sales and international trade, and I came to Congress to fight for working people. My family's path to the middle class was made possible because of the labor movement. My grandfather immigrated from Ireland and worked as a union laborer building bridges. It was hard work in unsafe conditions that are significantly better because of the building trades unions. My father was a firefighter and became president of his union to fight for better wages and safer working conditions. The contract he and his team negotiated while management tried and failed to break his spirit took his members from poverty wages to a family wage job. IAFF Local 789 is still working under that contract 40 years later. I grew up going to union halls and picket lines and with my father fighting to elect pro-worker candidates. So naturally, I became a member of Unite Here Local 26 as a union waitress during the AIDS crisis, where fellow union members had the dignity of health care and death benefits when they needed them because we belonged to a union. And I'm proud to say my son's a Teamster. I understand what's at stake for the working people of this country and my district because it's my story too, and I came to Congress to fight for everyday people to have a fair shot, to live in dignity and make a fair wage while they work hard and provide for their families. That's why I believe in economic populism, which is not just about talking at people. It's about listening to them and truly representing them. The fact is, workers feel left behind and that the two-party system doesn't represent them. Republicans have tied in with billionaires and restricted the rights of workers to organize and have union representation wherever possible. And while they're telling them that their enemy is their neighbor. And too many Democrats show up on a job site seemingly from a sense of noble obligation with wonky academic explanations about why everything's fine, even when everyday Americans can't make ends meet. I had an operating engineer tell me last week that he thinks both parties are pissing on his leg and telling him it's raining. We have to understand that working people do not want a handout. They want a good job and a pathway to the middle class and a comfortable retirement. And those opportunities have slipped away for too many people. When people tell us they're struggling to afford prescription medications, we can't turn around and tell them that they're wrong. We need to listen to them and hold Big Pharma accountable. When people tell us they see government as overly bureaucratic and complex, we can't dismiss that experience and say it's all fine. We need to ensure that taxpayer dollars are spent responsibly. So, of course, addressing waste, fraud, and abuse is important. We also need to make sure our veterans, our seniors, and the most vulnerable among us receive the benefits they've earned and not break government under the guise of efficiency. Democrats are the party that championed and protected things that working people rely on, like the Affordable Care Act, Social Security, stronger unions and workplace protections, the 40-hour work week, overtime pay, public education, and strong consumer protections. However, we need more Democrats whose filter for what they do in Congress is, will this help working people, as opposed to giving lip service in some disconnected way. We should all be fighting hard against corruption and for a real path to the middle class. Young people want to be able to work one job and afford to buy a home and raise a family. And that is not the reality for too many Americans. That's what Democrats should stand for and be working for every day. Our party must embrace economic populism and fight to revive the American dream, standing up for working people and giving them a chance to succeed. I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady from Oregon, Mr. Speaker. Tonight, we've heard from members, my side of the party, Democrats from across the country, representing a lot of different districts, but who are all speaking out on ways that we're fighting corruption and the excess of corporate power and the ways the Democratic Party ought to move forward, not for Democrats, but for everyone in this country. I want to thank my colleagues for joining me here today to say loud and clear that things need to change. Economic populism and patriotism ought to be where we go, standing up for our people without apology to revive the American dream. I have the honor of representing a battleground competitive district in Western Pennsylvania, My time here in Congress, I've been dead set on lowering costs, battling corruption, confronting corporate power. That means promoting competition and taking on monopolies, giving small businesses a shot to compete, fighting against these lousy trade deals that stripped communities for parts. It means making more stuff in America, cracking down on junk fees and price gouging, and standing up without apology for the union way of life. These are economic priorities to bring down costs, and they are good policy. The American people support them. We know that. Everybody hates getting ripped off. Everybody hates working hard and yet still not seeing a life that you can succeed in. If you want American capitalism to succeed, you've got to have competition in our economy. There's a tendency by some in politics to try and please everybody. You should take pride in when the bad guys and the villains who are screwing over your people are your enemy. It means you're doing something right. And I'm sick and tired of folks in Washington or the think tanks or wherever else looking for a win-win when there is a villain hurting our people. If a railroad sends a toxic fireball into the sky over a community, you don't look for a win-win, you fight them for your people. When PBMs are killing pharmacies and jacking up drug costs, you fight them. And sometimes there's a bad guy. There is not a win-win because our way of life is on the line, our safety's at risk. We have to stand up for our people. You don't cower like wimps. You don't go beg for donations from the people hurting yours. The goal is simple and popular here. It's to make life better. Less of a ripoff and to take on the corporate power and corruption that's hurting people. That is the path back to the American dream. This is our vision of economic patriotism and populism. And it's a winning one. It's one that can resonate from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt and everywhere in between, everywhere in this great country. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your patience and time. I yield down to my time.